I pulled into my driveway after a 12-hour shift at the warehouse in Phoenix, Arizona, and noticed a tow truck hauling away my sister's Honda Civic from the visitor parking spot. My heart dropped into my stomach as I slammed on the brakes and jumped out of my truck, waving my arms at the driver. "Hey, stop! That's my sister's car," I shouted, running toward the tow truck as it turned onto the main road. The driver either didn't hear me or didn't care, because he kept going, disappearing around the corner with Lisa's vehicle dangling from the back. I stood there in the middle of the street, breathing hard, my mind racing. Lisa had flown in from Seattle just yesterday to help me recover from my knee surgery next week. She'd parked in the designated visitor spot, right where she was supposed to. I'd even checked the HOA rules before she arrived to make sure everything was kosher. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Lisa calling from inside my house. "Kyle, where's my car? I went to grab my laptop and it's just gone." "It got towed," I said, heading back toward my house. "I just saw them take it. I'm coming inside now." I found Lisa standing in my living room, her face pale with worry. She was supposed to start a new remote job on Monday, and all her equipment was in that car. "How is that even possible?" "I parked exactly where you told me to park," she said, her voice rising with panic. "I know. Let me call the HOA and figure this out." I grabbed the community directory from my kitchen drawer and found the number for Patricia Donaldson, the HOA president. She picked up on the third ring. "Sunset Palms HOA, Patricia speaking." "Hi Patricia, this is Kyle Young from 2847 Desert Rose Lane. My sister's car just got towed from the visitor parking and I need to know why." There was a pause on the other end. "Oh yes, I authorized that tow myself." The vehicle didn't have a visitor pass displayed. "What visitor pass? There's nothing in the HOA guidelines about needing a pass. We implemented that policy 3 weeks ago, Mr. Young. All residents received an email notification." I pulled up my email on my phone, scrolling through hundreds of unread messages from work. I never saw any email about this. And even if there is a new policy, shouldn't there be warning stickers before you just tow someone's car? "The policy is the policy, Mr. Young. Your sister can retrieve her vehicle from Desert Valley Towing. The fees will be $275 for the tow plus $50 per day for storage." $275. That's insane. She's only been parked here for 1 day. Those are the standard rates. Have a nice evening. Patricia hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. Lisa looked at me with wide eyes. $275, she repeated, plus $50 a day if we don't get it out immediately. "Come on, let's go to this towing place and get your car back." Desert Valley Towing was located in a sketchy industrial area on the outskirts of Phoenix, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with barbed wire. The office was a small trailer with bars on the windows. A bored-looking guy in his 20s sat behind bulletproof glass playing on his phone. "Help you?" he asked without looking up. "You towed a Honda Civic from Sunset Palms about an hour ago. We're here to get it back." "That'll be $275 plus storage. It's barely been an hour." "There's no storage fee," I said. "Storage starts the moment the vehicle enters our lot. That's $50. Total is $325. "This is robbery," Lisa said, her voice shaking. The guy finally looked up at us with dead eyes. "You want your car or not?" I pulled out my credit card, my hands trembling with anger. This was highway robbery, but Lisa needed her car. We couldn't afford for it to sit here accumulating $50 per day fees while we fought this bureaucratic nightmare. After paying and signing about 15 different forms, we finally got Lisa's car back. She inspected it carefully for damage while I took photos of everything the towing companies sign, the receipt, the lot, all of it. "Why are you taking pictures?" Lisa asked as we prepared to leave. "Because something about this doesn't feel right," I said. Patricia was way too smooth about this whole thing, like she's done it a million times. Back at my house, I couldn't let it go. I sat at my computer and pulled up the HOA documents, reading through every page of the community guidelines, bylaws, and amendments. There was absolutely nothing about visitor passes. Nothing. I checked my email again, this time searching specifically for anything from the HOA. The last email from Patricia had been 6 months ago about a community barbecue. There was no notice about any visitor pass policy. "Lisa, come look at this," I called out. She walked over, still upset about the whole situation. "What is it?" "There's no email, no policy change, nothing." "I think Patricia just made that up." "But why would she do that? What does she gain from randomly towing people's cars?" That was the question, wasn't it? I leaned back in my chair thinking. What if she gets a kickback from the towing company? Lisa's eyes widened. "That's illegal, isn't it?" "Extremely illegal. That would be fraud, extortion, maybe even racketeering depending on how long it's been going on." My mind was racing now. I need to find out if this has happened to other people. I posted in the Sunset Palms Facebook group, describing what had happened and asking if anyone else had experienced similar incidents. Then, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, looking for answers. The visitor parking lot was at the front of the community, clearly marked with painted signs on the pavement. I walked the entire area, looking for any notices about visitor passes. There were none. No signs on poles, no notices on any boards, nothing. But I did notice something else. Cameras. There were security cameras pointed directly at the visitor parking area. Newer models that didn't match the older cameras elsewhere in the community. I snapped photos of everything with my phone, documenting the complete absence of any signage about visitor passes or parking policies. Then I went to visit my neighbor, Tom Martinez, who'd lived in Sunset Palms for almost a decade. Tom answered his door in a worn Phoenix Suns jersey, holding a beer. "Kyle, what's up, man? How's the knee?" "The knee's fine, but I've got a weird situation." "Did you know about any new visitor parking policy?" His face darkened immediately. "Oh man, don't get me started. My daughter came to visit last month and her car got towed. Cost me $300 to get it back." "Did Patricia say anything about a visitor pass?" "Yeah, same story. Said we needed to display a pass, but I never got any passes and never heard about any policy. I was so pissed, but what could I do? I needed to get Rachel's car back." "Did you try to fight it?" "I went to the next HOA meeting and complained. Patricia said she'd look into it, but I never heard back. Then when I pushed harder, she started sending me violation notices for stupid stuff. My trash can was visible from the street, my front yard had weeds, my mailbox needed paint. All petty stuff, but each violation was a $100 fine. So she basically threatened you into backing off." "Exactly. And it worked. I paid for the tow and shut up because I couldn't afford to keep getting fined for made-up violations." I thanked Tom and headed back home, my mind churning. This was bigger than one wrongful tow. This was a pattern of abuse and corruption. When I got home, my Facebook post had exploded. 15 people had commented with similar stories. Visitor cars towed without warning, expensive fees, and Patricia always citing the same visitor pass policy that nobody had ever heard about. Some people had been hit multiple times. One comment caught my attention. It was from a woman named Jennifer Chen who lived 3 streets over. "This happened to my elderly mother's car. She has mobility issues and we had to pay the fees plus late penalties because we couldn't get there in time. I tried to file a formal complaint with the HOA board, but Patricia is the only one who checks that email. The other board members are her friends, and they rubber stamp everything she does. I sent Jennifer a private message, and she called me within 10 minutes. "Thank God someone else is finally speaking up about this," she said. "I've been documenting everything since it happened to my mom. I work as a paralegal, and I know enough about the law to know this is fraud." "Do you think there's a kickback arrangement with the towing company?" I asked. "I'd bet money on it. I did some research on Desert Valley Towing. The owner is a guy named Rick Donaldson." I felt my stomach drop. "Donaldson? As in Patricia Donaldson?" "Yep, her husband. I checked the business registration records. He started that towing company 2 years ago, right around the time these mysterious visitor car tows started happening." "Holy hell. So she's directing tows to her husband's company and they're splitting the profits." "That's my theory, but proving it is another matter. We'd need documentation, bank records, something concrete." "What if we set up a sting?" I said, an idea forming in my mind. "What if we deliberately park a visitor car and document everything? Film the tow, record our interactions with Patricia, get everything on video." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "That could work, but we'd need to be smart about it. We should also file a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. They oversee HOA management companies and can investigate fraud." "Patricia doesn't work for a management company, though. She's just a resident who volunteered for the board." "Even better. That means she's subject to even stricter regulations. HOA board members have fiduciary duties to the community. If she's profiting from fraudulent towing, that's a breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and possibly extortion." We talked for another hour, formulating a plan. Jennifer would prepare the paperwork for filing complaints with the state. I would set up the sting operation to catch Patricia in the act. The next morning, I called my buddy Marcus from work. He drove a distinctive bright yellow Mustang that would be easy to identify on camera. "Hey man, I need a huge favor," I said, explaining the situation. "Wait, so you want me to park in your neighborhood so they'll tow my car? Are you insane?" Marcus said. "I'll pay the towing fees, every penny. But I need to catch this on video and prove they're running a scam. You'd be helping expose fraud that's been costing people hundreds of dollars." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "All right, but you're buying me dinner for a month. Deal." We planned it for that evening. I borrowed a high-quality video camera from another friend who did wedding photography. Lisa helped me set up multiple angles, positioning cameras to capture the visitor parking lot from different vantage points. I also set up my phone to record audio when I inevitably called Patricia about the tow. Marcus arrived at 6 p.m., parking his bright yellow Mustang directly in the center of a visitor spot. He made sure to park perfectly within the lines, doing everything exactly by the book. "How long do you think it'll take?" he asked. "Based on what happened to Lisa, probably within a couple hours. Patricia seems to watch that lot like a hawk." Marcus left in my truck, and I settled in to wait, cameras rolling. Lisa brought me coffee and sandwiches as the sun began to set over the Arizona desert. At 7:45 p.m., exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes after Marcus parked, a tow truck from Desert Valley Towing rolled into the community. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I watched through the camera viewfinder. The driver didn't check with any residents, didn't knock on doors, didn't leave any warnings. He just hooked up Marcus's Mustang and started lifting it. I grabbed my phone and called Patricia while filming the tow in progress. "Patricia, hi, this is Kyle Young again. There's a tow truck taking my friend's car from visitor parking right now. He just got here less than 2 hours ago. Does he have a visitor pass displayed?" Her voice was calm, practiced. "What visitor pass? There are no signs about any passes. I've walked the entire parking area." "Mr. Young, I've already explained this to you. We have a visitor pass policy. If your friend didn't obtain a pass, the vehicle is subject to towing. How exactly do residents obtain these passes? Where are they available? You can request them from the HOA office during business hours. We don't have an HOA office. You run this from your home. Then you can call me during business hours to arrange pickup. What are your business hours? There was a slight pause. Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 a.m. 2 hours a day only on weekdays. That's ridiculous. Most people work during those hours. Those are the established hours, Mr. Young. Your friend's vehicle will be at Desert Valley Towing. Have a nice evening. She hung up again. I had the entire conversation recorded, and every word was caught on camera along with the tow truck hauling away Marcus's perfectly legally parked vehicle. 20 minutes later, Marcus and I drove to Desert Valley, towing for the second time in 2 days. The same bored kid was working the window. "Yellow Mustang?" he asked as soon as we walked in. "Yeah," Marcus said, 325. "It hasn't even been here an hour," I protested. "How can you charge storage fees? Storage begins when the vehicle enters the lot. You want it or not?" I pulled out my credit card again, but this time I was documenting everything. I took photos of every form, every receipt, every sign in the place. The kid watched me with irritation but didn't stop me. As we were leaving, I noticed something interesting. There was a clipboard hanging near the door with a towing log. I casually glanced at it while pretending to check my phone. The log showed addresses and dates, and I quickly snapped a photo before the kid could notice. In the parking lot, Marcus inspected his Mustang carefully. "Well, at least they didn't damage it. So what now? Now we take all this evidence and file complaints with every agency that will listen." Back at home, I spent the rest of the night compiling everything. The videos, the audio recordings, the receipts, the photos of the complete absence of signage. Jennifer came over and helped me organize it all into a formal complaint package. "This is really good stuff," she said, reviewing the footage. You can clearly hear her cite a policy that doesn't exist, and the video shows there's no signage whatsoever. Plus the towing log photo you got might show a pattern. I didn't get a great look at it. "Can you enhance the photo?" She pulled it up on her laptop and zoomed in. The image was grainy but readable. "Oh my God, Kyle, look at this." I leaned over her shoulder. The towing log showed at least 5 or 6 tows per week from Sunset Palms going back months. All visitor vehicles, all with similar notations. No pass displayed. "That's potentially hundreds of fraudulent tows," I said, doing the mental math. "If each one costs around $300 and there are 5 or 6 per week, that's almost $80,000 per year. And that's just from our community. Look, there are other addresses listed too. Other HOAs around Phoenix." Jennifer was right. The log showed tows from at least 4 different residential communities, all with similar notations. "This isn't just HOA corruption," Jennifer said quietly. "This is organized fraud on a massive scale." The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. Jennifer helped me draft a detailed report outlining the fraud, including all our documentation. We also filed a complaint with the Arizona Attorney General's office and sent copies to the Phoenix Police Department's White-Collar Crime Division. But I didn't stop there. I contacted every person who'd commented on my Facebook post and asked them to file their own complaints, providing them with a template Jennifer had created. Within 48 hours, 23 families had filed formal complaints with various state agencies. I also posted all the evidence on the Sunset Palms Facebook group, except for the towing log photo. Jennifer advised keeping that as a trump card. The response was immediate and explosive. People were furious. Many hadn't realized this was happening to others and thought they'd been isolated incidents. Patricia posted a response trying to defend herself, claiming all the tows were legitimate and in accordance with community policies. But when residents started demanding to see these policies in writing and asking where to obtain visitor passes, she went silent. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The meeting was normally held in Patricia's living room with maybe 5 residents attending. This time, over 60 people showed up, forcing them to move the meeting to the community clubhouse. I arrived early with Lisa, Marcus, and Jennifer. The atmosphere was tense, angry. People were comparing notes about fraudulent tows, excessive fines, and Patricia's retaliation tactics against anyone who questioned her authority. Patricia walked in at 7 p.m. sharp with the other 3 board members, Susan Walker, Dennis Hughes, and Carol Freeman. All 3 were her close friends and had been rubber stamping her decisions for years. "Let's bring this meeting to order," Patricia said, trying to maintain her composure despite the packed room. She was a thin woman in her late 50s with short blonde hair and an permanent expression of disapproval. "Before we get to the agenda, I'd like to address the parking situation," I said, standing up. "That's not on the agenda," Patricia replied curtly. "I'm making it part of the agenda. As a homeowner in this community, I have the right to raise concerns." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Patricia's jaw tightened. "Fine, you have 5 minutes." "I don't need 5 minutes. I need you to produce documentation of this visitor pass policy you keep citing. I want to see the board resolution that implemented it, the community vote if required, and the communications that were sent to residents informing them of the change. That information is in the HOA records. Then produce it. Right now. You're the HOA president and you're sitting right there." Patricia shifted in her seat. "I don't have access to those records at this moment." "Convenient. Because I've reviewed every HOA document filed with the state, and there's no record of any such policy. I've checked my emails going back 2 years, and there's no communication about visitor passes. I've walked every inch of the visitor parking area, and there's no signage informing anyone of any pass requirement. The policy exists, Mr. Young. Your failure to stay informed is not my responsibility." "Then prove it. Show us the policy." Patricia's face was turning red. "I don't have to prove anything to you," Jennifer stood up. "Actually, you do. As a board member, you have fiduciary duties to this community. You're required to act in the best interests of all homeowners, not engage in self-dealing or fraud." "Who are you?" Patricia snapped. "Jennifer Chen, resident and paralegal. And I've filed formal complaints about your conduct with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, the Attorney General's office, and the Phoenix Police Department." The room erupted. People started shouting questions at Patricia, demanding answers. She tried to maintain control, but the board meeting devolved into chaos. Finally, Tom Martinez stood up and his booming voice cut through the noise. "I move for a vote of no confidence in Patricia Donaldson as HOA president." "You can't do that," Patricia said, her voice rising. "Yes, we can," Jennifer said calmly. "According to the community bylaws, any resident can propose a vote of no confidence, and if it's seconded by another resident, a vote must be held at the next board meeting." "I second the motion," I said immediately. Patricia looked like she wanted to explode. "This meeting is adjourned." "You can't just adjourn the meeting because you don't like what's happening," someone shouted. But Patricia was already grabbing her papers and storming out, with Susan, Dennis, and Carol trailing behind her looking uncomfortable. The residents stayed in the clubhouse for another hour, organizing and strategizing. We formed a committee to investigate the HOA's finances and started the process of calling a special election for new board members. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. The Arizona Department of Real Estate opened a formal investigation into Patricia's conduct. An investigator contacted me to request copies of all my documentation, which I gladly provided. But Patricia wasn't going down without a fight. I started receiving violation notices in my mailbox daily. My house number wasn't visible enough from the street. My front yard had weeds in the gravel. My garage door was left open during the day. Each violation came with a $100 fine. I documented every single one and forwarded them to the state investigator as evidence of retaliation. Then things took a darker turn. Someone slashed my tires while my truck was parked in my driveway overnight. My doorbell camera caught a figure in dark clothing approaching around 2 a.m., but the image was too grainy to identify anyone. I filed a police report, though I had my suspicions about who was behind it. The investigating officer seemed sympathetic, but explained that without clear evidence, there wasn't much they could do. "Be careful," the officer warned me. "People get crazy when money's involved, especially if they think they're about to lose everything." I installed additional security cameras around my property and made sure to park my truck in the garage. Lisa decided to cut her visit short and head back to Seattle, worried about the escalating situation. "I'm sorry to leave you dealing with this," she said as I drove her to the airport. "It's not your fault. None of this is. I'm just glad we caught it before more people got scammed." The special HOA election was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, a group of concerned residents, including Jennifer, Tom, Marcus, and myself, formed a reform slate to run for the board positions. I didn't particularly want to be on the HOA board, but someone had to clean up this mess. Jennifer had the legal knowledge, Tom had the institutional memory of the community, and Marcus volunteered to be treasurer so he could audit the finances. Patricia and her allies launched a whisper campaign against us, spreading rumors that we were troublemakers trying to destroy the community. Some residents, particularly the older ones who'd been friends with Patricia for years, believed her, but most people had either experienced the towing scam personally or knew someone who had. The tide was turning against Patricia, and she knew it. 2 weeks before the election, I received a certified letter from a law firm representing Patricia. It was a cease and desist, demanding I stop making defamatory statements about her and threatening to sue me for damages. I immediately forwarded it to Jennifer, who laughed when she read it. "This is an intimidation tactic," she said. "Everything you've said about her is either provably true or a statement of opinion based on documented facts. She has no case. Should I be worried? No. In fact, this letter might actually help our investigation. She's trying to silence you, which shows consciousness of guilt. Forward this to the state investigator." I did exactly that. The investigator, a serious woman named Maria Rodriguez, thanked me and said the investigation was progressing well. "I can't share details," she said, "but I can tell you that what you've uncovered appears to be accurate. We're looking at a significant amount of fraud." The day before the election, a bombshell dropped. The Arizona Attorney General's office announced that Patricia Donaldson and her husband Rick were being charged with multiple counts of fraud, extortion, and theft. The announcement came with details of how they'd been running the towing scam across multiple HOAs, generating over $200,000 in fraudulent towing fees over 2 years. The news spread through Sunset Palms like wildfire. I got dozens of calls and texts from neighbors who'd seen the news coverage. Patricia's face was all over local news channels, being escorted from her house by police in handcuffs. The HOA election the next day was almost anti-clockwise. Patricia and her slate withdrew their names, leaving our reform slate to run unopposed. We won with nearly unanimous support. My first act as a board member was to authorize refunds to everyone who'd been fraudulently towed. Jennifer helped us draft a restitution policy, and we set aside HOA reserve funds to compensate victims while we waited for potential restitution from Patricia and Rick's criminal cases. We also immediately rescinded all the retaliatory fines Patricia had issued and removed any spurious violations from homeowner records. Marcus, as the new treasurer, spent weeks untangling the HOA finances. He discovered that Patricia had been skimming money in other ways, too, inflating maintenance contracts with vendors who gave her kickbacks, charging the HOA for supplies that were never purchased, and paying herself an unauthorized salary as president. The total fraud is probably close to $300,000, Marcus told me one evening as we reviewed his findings. She was systematically looting this HOA for years. How did nobody notice? She was the only one with access to the bank accounts, and she always presented simplified reports to the board. Susan, Dennis, and Carol just trusted her and never asked questions. We turned all of Marcus's findings over to the authorities. The charges against Patricia and Rick expanded to include embezzlement and money laundering. The criminal case moved slowly through the courts. Patricia hired an expensive defense attorney who tried every delay tactic in the book. But the evidence was overwhelming. We had documentation, recordings, witness testimony, and her own words on video admitting to policies that didn't exist. 8 months after the initial charges, Patricia and Rick both accepted plea deals. Patricia pleaded guilty to fraud and embezzlement and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Rick pleaded guilty to fraud and got 3 years. They were also ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, though Jennifer warned us not to expect much. They've already spent most of the money, she explained. Even with restitution orders, we'll be lucky to recover a fraction of it. Still, it felt like justice. The woman who'd been terrorizing our community and scamming innocent visitors was behind bars. At the next community meeting, now held regularly and transparently with detailed minutes published online, residents thanked our reform slate for taking action. I was afraid to speak up, one elderly woman said. Patricia towed my daughter's car twice, and when I complained, she threatened to fine me for every little thing. I felt helpless. That's exactly why we had to do this, I said. Nobody should feel afraid in their own community. We implemented new policies to prevent future abuse. All board decisions required a majority vote with detailed documentation. Financial records were made available to any homeowner who requested them. We hired an independent management company to handle day-to-day operations and provide professional oversight. We also created a real visitor pass system, but one that was fair, clearly communicated, and easy to use. Residents could request temporary passes online or by phone, and we posted clear signage explaining the policy. Most importantly, we implemented a warning system where vehicles received a courtesy notice before any towing, giving owners a chance to move their cars. As for Desert Valley Towing, Rick's business license was revoked, and the company was shut down permanently. The Attorney General's office was investigating whether other towing companies had similar arrangements with corrupt HOA board members around the state. My knee surgery went fine, delayed by a few weeks due to all the drama. During my recovery, Tom and Marcus handled most of the HOA administrative work, checking in with me regularly to keep me informed. One afternoon, about a year after the whole ordeal began, I was sitting on my back patio enjoying the Arizona sunshine when Jennifer stopped by with some news. "The restitution payments are starting to come through," she said, handing me a check. "It's not the full amount, but the court seized some of Patricia and Rick's assets." I looked at the check. It was for $150, about half of what Lisa's tow had cost. "It's something," I said. "More than that. It's accountability. Patricia and Rick thought they could get away with it because nobody would fight back. You proved them wrong." After Jennifer left, I sat there thinking about the whole experience. I'd never imagined that my sister's car getting towed would uncover a massive fraud operation. I'd never wanted to be on an HOA board or spend months fighting corruption. But I'd learned something important. Communities depend on people willing to stand up when something's wrong. If everyone just pays the unjust fees and keeps quiet, the Patricia Donaldsons of the world keep getting away with it. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Saw that you got some restitution money. Buy me dinner next time I visit." I smiled and typed back, "Deal. But you're parking in the driveway this time." She sent back a laughing emoji and a middle finger emoji, which pretty much summed up how we all felt about visitor parking at this point. The Sunset Palms community slowly recovered from the Patricia era. Property values actually went up once word got out that we'd cleaned house and implemented transparent governance. People wanted to live in a community that held leaders accountable. I served on the HOA board for 2 years before stepping down to focus on other things. Jennifer took over as president, and she was phenomenal, firm but fair, always following the rules and genuinely caring about the community. Marcus stayed on as treasurer for 3 years, eventually training a replacement when his job required him to relocate to California. We stayed in touch, and he still joked that I owed him dinner for that yellow Mustang sting operation. Tom continued to be the community's institutional memory, the guy who'd lived there longest and knew everyone. He became the unofficial neighborhood watch coordinator, keeping an eye out for suspicious activity and looking after the older residents. One thing that surprised me was how the whole experience changed my perspective on HOAs. Before all this, I'd seen them as annoying bureaucratic organizations that existed mainly to hassle people about lawn maintenance. Now I understood they could actually serve important functions, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, preserving property values, but only if run honestly and transparently. The key was involvement. Most HOA horror stories happened because residents were apathetic and let power-hungry people take control. Once people started paying attention and participating, the HOA became a force for good rather than a source of fear and frustration. About 2 years after Patricia went to prison, I got a call from Maria Rodriguez, the investigator from the Department of Real Estate. "I wanted to thank you personally," she said. "Your case led us to uncover similar fraud schemes in 17 other HOAs across Arizona. We've brought charges against 8 different people, and we've recovered over $400,000 in restitution for victims." "I had no idea it was that widespread," I said. "Most people don't." HOA fraud is underreported because victims feel powerless, or they don't realize what's happening is illegal, or they're afraid of retaliation. What you did, documenting everything, organizing other victims, refusing to be intimidated, that's the blueprint for how to fight back. "I just got mad about my sister's car getting towed," Maria laughed. "Sometimes that's all it takes. One person who gets mad enough to do something about it." After we hung up, I thought about that conversation for a long time. It was true I hadn't set out to be some kind of HOA corruption crusader. I'd just been pissed off about an injustice and stubborn enough to dig deeper instead of paying the fee and moving on. But that stubbornness had mattered. It had saved people money, brought criminals to justice, and reformed an entire community. Not bad for a warehouse worker with a bum knee and a YouTube addiction to HOA horror stories. Speaking of which, I actually submitted my story to one of those Reddit HOA revenge channels. It got picked up and narrated, and the video got over 2 million views. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with hundreds of people sharing their own HOA nightmare stories. A few people recognized the case from news coverage and confirmed details. One commenter even claimed to be a resident of one of the other HOAs where Patricia and Rick had run their scam, thanking me for exposing them. The attention was weird and unexpected, but it also connected me with other people fighting similar battles. I got messages from folks dealing with corrupt HOA boards, asking for advice on how to document abuse and who to report it to. Jennifer and I put together a guide with step-by-step instructions, which we shared freely with anyone who needed it. My life eventually returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after going through something like that. I went back to working at the warehouse, dealing with my knee problems, and living quietly in Sunset Palms, which was now actually a pleasant place to live. The community garden that Patricia had always voted against finally got approved and built. We started having regular social events that weren't thinly disguised excuses for Patricia to lecture people about violations. Kids played in the streets without fear that some HOA busybody would complain about noise. It was what a community was supposed to be. One Saturday afternoon, about 3 years after everything went down, I was washing my truck in the driveway when a moving van pulled up to the house across the street. A young couple got out, looking excited and nervous the way new homeowners always do. I walked over to introduce myself. "Hey, I'm Kyle. Welcome to the neighborhood." The husband shook my hand enthusiastically. "Thanks. I'm James. This is my wife, Sarah. We're excited to be here. We heard this is a really well-run community." "It is now," I said, and then told them the whole story, the short version anyway. Their eyes got wider as I talked. When I finished, Sarah shook her head in amazement. "Wow, that's incredible. You basically saved the community." "Not by myself. A lot of people stepped up, but yeah, we fixed some problems." "Is there anything we should know about the HOA?" James asked. "Just stay informed and get involved if you can. Come to the meetings, read the communications, ask questions if something seems off. The HOA works for us, not the other way around." They thanked me for the advice, and I helped them carry a few boxes inside before heading back to my truck. As I finished washing it, I noticed Jennifer walking her dog past my house. "New neighbors," she called out. "Yep, nice couple. I gave them the HOA orientation speech," she laughed. "Let me guess, stay informed, get involved, ask questions. You know it." "You've become quite the community advocate, Kyle." "I've become a guy who doesn't like getting screwed over and is willing to do something about it. There's a difference." "Not much of one," Jennifer said, continuing her walk. I thought about that as I coiled up the hose. Maybe she was right. Maybe getting screwed over and refusing to accept it was a form of advocacy. Maybe that's how most people ended up fighting for things, not because they set out to be activists, but because something happened that they couldn't ignore. That evening, I sat on my patio with a cold beer, watching the Arizona sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I thought about everything that had happened, all the stress and anger and fear, but also the satisfaction of seeing justice done and a community healed. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. "Thinking about visiting next month. Is it safe to park in the visitor lot now? Lol, I texted back. Totally safe. But seriously, just park in my driveway. I have trust issues now. She sent back a string of laughing emojis. I finished my beer and went inside, feeling good about life. My knee was mostly healed, my community was thriving, and somewhere Patricia Donaldson was spending another day in prison thinking about how her greed had destroyed her life. Meanwhile, the rest of us were moving on, building something better. A few weeks later, the local news ran a follow-up story on HOA fraud cases in Arizona. They interviewed me and several other victims, and they highlighted the reforms that had been implemented across multiple communities as a result of our cases. The reporter, a sharp woman named Deanna Chen, asked me what I'd say to people dealing with similar situations. Document everything, I said, looking directly at the camera. Take photos, save emails, record conversations if you're in a one-party consent state. Don't let anyone intimidate you into silence. And most importantly, find other people who have been affected. There's power in numbers. Nobody can fight a corrupt HOA alone, but a group of informed, organized residents can change everything. The interview aired during the evening news, and my phone blew up with messages from neighbors and strangers alike. Some thanked me, some shared their own stories, and a few probably friends of Patricia accused me of being a troublemaker and a publicity hound. I ignored the negative comments. After everything I'd been through, some anonymous criticism wasn't going to bother me. What did matter was a message I got from a guy named Robert Chen, who introduced himself as Diana's husband. "My wife told me about your case," he wrote. "I'm a professor of public administration at ASU, and I'd like to include your story in a case study I'm developing about HOA governance and corruption. Would you be willing to participate?" I agreed, and over the next few months, I worked with Professor Chen and his graduate students to document the whole Patricia Donaldson saga in academic detail. They interviewed dozens of Sunset Palms residents, reviewed all the financial records Marcus had compiled, and analyzed the systemic failures that had allowed Patricia to operate unchecked for so long. The resulting case study was published in a journal on public administration and used in college courses teaching students about organizational accountability and community governance. I got a kick out of the fact that future public administrators would learn about HOA fraud by studying Patricia's crimes and our response to them. "You're famous in very specific academic circles," Marcus joked when I told him about it. "That's the best kind of famous," I replied. "Nobody's going to recognize me at the grocery store, but somewhere a grad student is writing a paper about HOA reform and citing our case." Life continued. I got promoted at work to a shift supervisor position, which came with better pay and slightly better hours. I started dating a woman named Rebecca who worked in the warehouse office. She thought the whole HOA story was hilarious and called me her suburban vigilante. "You're like Batman, but for housing associations," she teased. "Batman doesn't have to go to monthly board meetings and approve landscaping budgets," I pointed out. "True, you're much braver than Batman." 4 years after Patricia's arrest, I got a notification that she was up for parole. Jennifer organized a group of victims to submit impact statements to the parole board, detailing how her crimes had affected our lives and our community. I wrote about the fear her retaliation campaign had caused, the financial burden of the fraudulent tows, and the erosion of trust in community governance. I also wrote about how much work it had taken to rebuild that trust and reform the HOA. Patricia Donaldson shouldn't be released early, I concluded in my statement. She showed no remorse throughout her trial, and she hasn't made full restitution to her victims. Releasing her now would send a message that HOA fraud isn't serious, when in reality it can devastate entire communities. The parole board denied her release. She'd serve her full sentence. When Jennifer told me the news, I felt a grim satisfaction. Justice wasn't always perfect or fast, but sometimes it worked the way it was supposed to. Around this time, the Arizona legislature passed new laws strengthening HOA oversight and accountability, partly in response to our case and the others it had uncovered. The laws required regular financial audits of HOAs, mandatory reporting of board conflicts of interest, and easier processes for homeowners to challenge board decisions. Jennifer was invited to testify during the legislative hearings, and she brought me along for support. Sitting in the state capitol, listening to lawmakers discuss HOA reform because of what we'd uncovered was surreal. "Did you ever think you'd be here?" Jennifer whispered during a break in testimony. "No, I thought I'd spend my life loading trucks and watching TV." Definitely didn't expect to help change state law. Life's funny that way. The reforms passed with bipartisan support and were signed into law by the governor. Our local representatives even held a press conference where they specifically mentioned the Sunset Palms case as an example of why these protections were necessary. Back in our community, life had settled into a comfortable routine. The HOA functioned smoothly under Jennifer's leadership, and later under her successor, a retired accountant named Harold Pritchard, who brought professional rigor to the finances. I stepped away from active involvement after my 2-year term, but stayed informed and attended meetings occasionally. I'd done my part, and now it was time for others to step up. Lisa visited regularly, always parking in my driveway despite my assurances that the visitor lot was perfectly safe now. Some traumas leave lasting effects, even small ones. Marcus moved back to Phoenix after 3 years in California, buying a house 2 neighborhoods over. We met up regularly for basketball games and barbecues, and he never let me forget that I still owed him theoretical dinners for the Mustang Sting operation. Tom remained in Sunset Palms, eventually retiring from his job and becoming even more involved in community affairs. He started a neighborhood watch program that actually worked, helping prevent several burglaries and making everyone feel safer, and me. I kept loading trucks, watching TV, living my life. But I also kept my eyes open for injustice, kept my phone camera ready to document problems, and kept my willingness to fight when something wasn't right. Because that's what I'd learned from the whole experience. Ordinary people have more power than they think. They just have to be willing to use it. One evening, about 5 years after this all began, I was sitting on my patio when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman in her 30s holding a folder. "Are you Kyle Young?" she asked. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Amanda Peterson. I live over in Desert Springs community, about 10 miles from here. I think my HOA is running the same towing scam that happened here." I invited her in, and she told me her story. It was eerily similar: visitor cars towed without warning, a board president citing policies that nobody could verify, excessive fees, retaliation against anyone who complained. "I saw your news interview online," Amanda said. I watched it probably 10 times, taking notes. Then I found the academic case study online and read the whole thing. I've been documenting everything for the past 2 months, and I think I have enough to file complaints. "Let me call Jennifer," I said. "She'll want to hear this." We spent the next 3 hours going through Amanda's documentation, helping her organize it and prepare formal complaints. Jennifer walked her through the process we'd followed, giving her names of contacts at various state agencies and advice on how to build her case. "This is definitely fraud," Jennifer confirmed. "Your board president has a brother who owns the towing company. Same scam, different neighborhood." "Can you help me?" Amanda asked, looking between us nervously. Jennifer and I exchanged a glance. We'd both moved on with our lives, but here was someone who needed the knowledge we'd gained the hard way. "Of course we'll help," I said. "Nobody should have to figure this out alone." Over the following months, we mentored Amanda through her fight against her corrupt HOA. It felt good to use our experience to help someone else, to make sure she didn't have to make the same mistakes we'd made or waste time figuring out what we already knew. Amanda's case eventually led to arrests of her HOA president and his brother, reforms in Desert Springs similar to those we'd implemented in Sunset Palms, and more victims coming forward. "Thank you," Amanda told us after her board president pleaded guilty. "I couldn't have done this without you guys." "Sure you could have," Jennifer said. "You had the courage to start. We just helped you finish." After Amanda left, I sat with Jennifer in my living room, drinking coffee and reflecting on how far we'd come. "We're accidentally experts on HOA corruption now," I said. "Could be worse. We could be experts at something boring." "Fair point. Think we should start a consulting service, travel around Arizona fixing corrupt HOAs?" I laughed. "Absolutely not. I'm done fighting HOA boards. I've served my time." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. If someone else came to me needing help, needing guidance on how to fight back against corruption, I'd help them. Because that's what you do when you've learned something important, you pass it on. That's really what this whole story is about. Not just one corrupt HOA president and the people who brought her down, but the larger truth that communities are only as strong as the people willing to defend them. Patricia Donaldson got away with her scams for years because people were afraid or uninformed or too tired to fight back. She only got stopped because one person and his sister's towed Honda Civic decided that enough was enough. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person who refuses to let an injustice slide. One person who asks questions, documents answers, and refuses to be intimidated. One person who organizes others and turns individual grievances into collective action. I wasn't special. I wasn't particularly brave or smart or qualified. I was just stubborn and pissed off, and I had the privilege of time and resources to pursue the issue. But that was enough. Now, years later, I live in a community that's genuinely functional. Property values are up, resident satisfaction is high, and nobody lives in fear of arbitrary fines or scam tows. Patricia Donaldson is in prison where she belongs. Her victims received at least partial restitution, and Arizona has stronger laws protecting homeowners from HOA fraud. And somewhere out there in neighborhoods across the state and beyond, other people are fighting their own battles against corrupt HOA boards. Some of them will succeed because they found our story online, or read the case study, or heard about the reforms we pushed for. That ripple effect, that's the real victory. Not just fixing one community, but showing others that it can be done. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Still at Tom's barbecue? Heading over now." I texted back that I'd meet her there and grabbed a beer from my fridge before heading out. As I walked down the street toward Tom's house, I passed the visitor parking lot, now clearly marked with proper signage explaining the simple, fair parking policy. No sketchy tow trucks prowled our streets anymore. No residents lived in fear of Patricia's retaliation. The community had healed, and life was good. I heard laughter and music drifting from Tom's backyard, where neighbors gathered for another weekend barbecue. Marcus's yellow Mustang was parked in the driveway, and I smiled remembering how that car had helped bring down a criminal enterprise. Life had returned to normal, but it was a better normal. A normal built on accountability, transparency, and people willing to stand up for what's right. And if some other corrupt HOA president out there is reading this story and thinking they can get away with scamming their community, let me be clear. You can't. Not anymore. Because now people know what to look for. They know how to document abuse. They know which agencies to contact and what laws protect them. They know they're not alone. We made sure of that. I reached Tom's backyard and was immediately pulled into conversation and handed a burger. Rebecca arrived and kissed my cheek. Marcus challenged me to a game of cornhole. Jennifer was deep in conversation with Harold about some upcoming board decision. This was community. Not the fake version Patricia had ruled over with fear and fraud, but the real thing. People who looked out for each other, who stood together when it mattered, who'd learned that silence enables corruption while action creates change. As the sun set over Phoenix and the party continued into the evening, I felt genuinely content. The battle had been exhausting and stressful, but winning it had been worth every moment. And if another fight came along, another injustice that needed addressing, I'd be ready. Because that's who I'd become, not just some warehouse guy who happened to catch an HOA scam, but someone who understood that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they decide to use it. Patricia Donaldson had thought she was untouchable, that her position gave her immunity from consequences. She'd thought wrong, and that's a lesson every corrupt HOA board member needs to learn. Your residents aren't helpless. They're not powerless. And if you push them far enough, they'll push back. We certainly did.